It's time for the 2026-2027 FAFSA. The U.S. Department of Education has confirmed that the application will be released October 1st, so no delays this year. But let's go through the 2026-2027 FAFSA and run some scenarios. Let's go through as a dependent undergraduate student, as an undergraduate student who may be facing some issues with providing parent information, as well as looking at that parent experience. We're going to walk through each of these scenarios. Make sure to check out the table of contents to go to the section that applies to you the best. Now, for the most part, most parents and most students and any FAFSA contributors are going to be using the federal tax information transfer, and you are still required to authorize that even if it doesn't happen. But most families will see that as the way that your financial information is imported, and there's very few questions after that point. But let's go through the 2026-2027 FAFSA. When going to complete the 2026-2027 FAFSA, you want to start by going to studentaid.gov. So you're going to type that right in, and then you're going to see the FAFSA form is one of the options here, and you're going to go ahead and click complete the FAFSA. When you get to the FAFSA page, what you'll be seeing here is some information about the FAFSAs you can apply for. You may see more than one FAFSA application at one given time. Now, we are recording this prior to October 1, 2025, so you're seeing this a little bit, it might look a little bit different now. But if you are doing this before October 1, this is the type of screen you'll see. See, the 2026-2027 application is open. You can edit and you can accept an invitation, which basically means FAFSA contributor, so that could be your parent, a step-parent, or a spouse. However, you might also see the option to do the 2025-2026 FAFSA because that is still ongoing and will be ongoing until June 30th, 2026. So there will be a bit of an overlap. But let's dive into the demo. Remember, this is for demonstration purposes only, and we're going to be completing the application as a dependent undergraduate student to show you how the process works and what to expect. Now, the student is the owner of this application, so the student would be the one who the application belongs to. The student may need some FAFSA contributors, which could be a FAFSA parent, a step-parent, or a spouse if they're married. Now, if you're married, you're not going to be in dependent student, you would be independent, but your spouse may be required to provide information on the FAFSA. So once you click on the application, you would be brought to the login page. Your login is going to be your FSA ID, your username and password. If you don't have one, you can make one. As soon as you make one, it may take a little bit of time before you're able to use it because it will be doing a verification of your name, your social security, and a date of birth, and making sure everything matches. Once you have that, you can go ahead and log in. It's going to bring you to the FAFSA landing page here, and you're going to click Start a New Form. When you start a new form, you're now in the FAFSA application. It might look a little bit like Student Aid at the very top, but we're going to be focusing on the main part of the screen, which your application is going to be. Since we're completing this from the perspective of a student, you're going to go ahead and click Student. Now, if you received an invitation code, that means someone has already started the FAFSA on behalf of the student or a parent who has multiple children, so you might have a code to help you get started. The first page is briefly going to touch on what the FAFSA form is and some of the documents that you'll need. So if you don't have these already with you, take a quick look and gather this information just so you're ready to answer the questions on the FAFSA. Now, there'll be a very informative video that you can watch and sit through, offered by the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Federal Student Aid, the owners, and those who manage the FAFSA, so it might be helpful if you've never completed the application before. Then it's going to walk through who a FAFSA contributor is. Like I said, as a dependent undergraduate student, this is likely going to be your parent or your parent's spouse. If your parents aren't together and your FAFSA parent is remarried, you may be required to provide that information of your step parent. But you're going to go through and define and understand who your FAFSA contributors are. And here's a nice brief explanation as well as a video. If your parents aren't together, they're divorced, separated, or were never married, you might be confused about who your FAFSA parent is going to be and who's going to be that FAFSA contributor. Here are the scenarios that you want to consider and go through and find which one applies to determine who is your FAFSA parent. Essentially, it's going to be if your parents are married and they file taxes jointly, only one parent is required to be the FAFSA contributor. Now that's because if they filed a joint tax return, when they authorize the transfer of that information from the IRS, it's going to take the full tax return, which would have both parents' information if they filed jointly. If they filed separately, then both of your parents would be FAFSA contributors and they would both have to complete a portion. Now, this is important to know because anyone who's a FAFSA contributor does need to have their own FSA ID, username, and password. Now, if your parents are divorced, separated, or never married and they don't live together, you're going to be choosing the parent who provided you with the most financial support in the last 12 months. If they provided you the same amount or equal amount of support, then you will be choosing the parent with a greater income and assets to be the contributor to your FAFSA. If your FAFSA parent is now married, so you determine who your FAFSA parent is, and they didn't file taxes with their current spouse or your step-parent or that spouse is also going to be a FAFSA contributor on your FAFSA application. Then we're going to hit continue. The FAFSA is only expected to take about 30 minutes, and we've seen families go through it in a lot shorter time. With that transfer of information and having all the documents that you need ready can really make it go quickly. One of the most important things to know since the FAFSA simplification is that you need to, anyone who provides information on a FAFSA must provide consent and approval to have their tax information automatically transferred from the IRS. That federal tax information, also known as FTI, you need to give consent for that. Even if you didn't file taxes, even if you still have to input the information manually, you must always give the approval and consent for that federal tax information transfer. If you do not, you will not be eligible for any federal student aid. And this goes for not only the student, but any FAFSA contributor for your FAFSA application. And the Department of Ed does provide a nice video to explain what the FAFSA consent and approval is. And then it's going to give you a quick overview of what to expect when it's all over. Everything from getting your FAFSA submission summary to your SAI, or that student aid index, which has replaced the expected family contribution. Expected family contribution was used for so long that if your parents haven't done this in a long time, they might be going back to thinking EFC, but now that's known as your student aid index, or SAI. The schools will take that SAI and your FAFSA information, and that's how they'll determine what type of financial aid you are eligible for. And only the schools that you put on your application will receive that information. So after that quick little overview of some very important steps of the FAFSA, now you can get started with the application. The student identity information will be pulled in from your FSA ID. There is one part that you are able to edit, and that's going to be your permanent mailing address. It's very important that you keep this up to date and you provide the permanent mailing address on your FAFSA application or make any changes if needed. If any information above needs to be updated, that needs to happen through your FSA ID. So the same place where you created it, going to studentaid.gov, the top right, when you go into the login, you'll see your dashboard. And if you need to make any changes to the information you can't change, you would have to at least start there. And there's certain things that you will not be able to change without further help or guidance if they're incorrect. And then you would have to contact the U.S. Department of Education Office of Federal Student Aid's Information Center. The next question you'll be asked is your state of residence. Make sure to go ahead and update this if it needs to be changed. Your state of residence can be important in determining your in-state and out-of-school tuition if that does apply. Then you want to go ahead and add in the year you became a resident. I highly recommend being accurate with this because your state may have certain rules of when they consider you a resident for your state, and that could affect your in-state and out-of-state tuition. Now we're getting into the actual consent. We learned about the consent, we understood the consent. Now we're going through what the actual consent is, and now we're going through the steps to provide that consent. You'll get a summary of what is being asked. You're asked for your consent and approval to retrieve and disclose information into your FAFSA. That's your federal tax information. Here are the terms you are consenting to. It's very important to read anything and everything that you're being asked to consent to. You will see here that consent and affirmative approval are required as a condition of eligibility for federal student aid. And if you look here at number 5, if you do not consent, then the U.S. Department of Education, or ED, will be unable to calculate your eligibility for federal student aid. And then going down, there's some FAQs if there's anything you don't understand or anything you want further clarification on right there. This is where you will be giving the consent right here. This approve is the consent. Decline of disclosing the information or having it transferred over, which would make you ineligible for federal student aid. So for this demo, we are going to go ahead and click approve. So it's going to take a little bit of time to import, and then it'll let you know if it's successful or not. Your personal circumstances. We're going to go through some of these personal circumstances for those who have completed a paper application, who have seen older versions of the online FAFSA application, is determining if you are a dependent or independent student. So we're going to go ahead for this demo and choose that we are single, never married. The student is single and never married. What grade level the student will be. When it's talking here, first year freshman, second year sophomore, other undergraduate, these are all undergraduate grade levels. If you're going to get a master's degree, a graduate certificate, or a doctorate, you would then choose this final option here. Being a graduate student at any level will automatically make you an independent student for financial aid purposes. But for this demo, we are going to be a first year freshman in an undergraduate degree program. Then we're being asked is when the student begins the 2026-2027 school year, which is going to be any time between July 1, 2026 and June 30th, 2027, if they already have their first bachelor's degree. For this demonstration, we're going to click no. If you were to click yes, and you are going back to an undergraduate program, you likely will not be eligible for any federal Pell Grants. Pell Grants are only offered to students who have yet to earn a bachelor's degree. So if you indicate that you already earned a bachelor's degree, you would no longer be eligible for a Pell Grant. For this demo, as a first year, first time student, we're going to choose no for that answer. Then the personal circumstances are going to be your dependency status. The first two have to do with military or active duty. The next has to do with being able to claim a child or other dependent who will live with you, and you provide half the support between July 1, 2026 and June 30th, 2027. The next few will have to do with any situations that you have faced since the age of 13. Were you an orphan with no biological or adoptive parent? Since the age of 13, were you considered a ward of the court? Since the age of 13, were you in foster care? Are you illegally emancipated as determined by a court in the state of your residence? Or are you in a legal guardianship with someone who is not your parent or step-parent as determined by a court in your state of residence? If none of these apply, go ahead and select it. If they do apply, choose the one that applies and hit continue. For this demo, we're going to say none apply. There's going to be some additional questions about homelessness and at-risk youth. Make sure you read this question carefully if this is a situation you have dealt with. You want to make sure you answer this correctly. If not, your FAFSA might identify you as a dependent student when you should have been identified as an independent student. We're going to go ahead and click no for this scenario. Unusual circumstances could be a situation where you are in a bad situation or you're estranged from your parents. This is not the same as your parents are just refusing to provide information on your FAFSA. This means there's something else more serious going on. And this is what's defined as unusual circumstance, but it really is a circumstance that potentially you are in danger, have been in danger, or have been victim of many horrible things. So make sure if this applies to answer the question appropriately so that you are not required to provide information of your parents, especially if that would pose a risk to you and your safety. For this demo, we are going to choose no and hit continue. What the FAFSA is trying to do right now with the unusual circumstances and the dependency status is determine if you are required, since you meet the criteria that you're under the age of 24, you are not married, if there is any reason why your parents' information should not be collected. And those are more serious situations. Now we get to the question that essentially says, is your parent refused to provide information on the FAFSA? If you click yes here, you will only be eligible for direct unsubsidized student loan funds and no other types of federal student aid. So you just want to make sure you're answering this question correctly, and if your parent is refusing and they absolutely will not provide information, then you will be limited on the type of financial aid that you can receive. For this particular demo, we're going to click no because we're going to remain that dependent student for FAFSA purposes only. That can get tricky sometimes. That idea of dependency status and being claimed by a parent is also some terminology we see on taxes. This dependency status is strictly for the FAFSA application. It's easy to confuse. We pull a lot of information and language from the IRS and tax returns, but when it comes to dependency status, it is a FAFSA-based definition to determine your aid eligibility. Next, we're going to go into student demographics. The next set of questions are going to be for research purposes only, and you can just respond appropriately, but it will not affect your aid eligibility. The first question is going to be student sex. You're going to see male and female. In the past, there were more options, but as of now, these are the options that are given through the FAFSA form. The next is going to be student race and ethnicity. This is for research purposes only. It does not affect your aid eligibility. If you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to answer. You can choose prefer not to answer. If there's any hesitation of why you don't want to provide this, there's no explanation that's needed. Just go ahead and make that choice and you can hit continue. The next is going to be citizenship status. In order to be eligible for federal student aid, this has been a requirement since federal student aid has been an option, is that you, the student, just the student, not the parents or any FAFSA contributors, must be a U.S. citizen or national or an eligible non-citizen. While there's an option for neither U.S. citizen nor eligible non-citizen, that is for schools that are still asking you to complete the FAFSA, even though they know you will not be eligible for federal student aid. It's a way to get the information into their system, but that does not mean that you will be eligible for federal student aid if you're allowed to continue with the application. It's just to get the information into the system for the school. That's going to be up to the school. If you're in a situation where your citizenship status, it does not make you eligible for federal student aid, talk to the school before you start working on the FAFSA. Make sure they need you to complete it or asking you to complete it. If they have other forms or other applications they want you to complete, it's probably better to go ahead and complete those rather than bothering with the FAFSA because it may not be helpful to you. The next question is going to ask your parents' education status. This has been a question on the FAFSA for a long time. The answer does not impact your financial aid. You're not eligible for more or less financial aid because of your parents' college completion. And many students don't know what their parents' college education status is. So you can go ahead and answer the question based on the situation of your parents, and if you don't know, you can also indicate that you don't know. Now, parents killed in the line of duty. This question is to help determine eligibility for certain grants that will be awarded to students who may not be Pell eligible, but they can receive other types of grant funds if they have a parent who unfortunately passed away or was killed in the line of duty. So be sure to read the description above and identify if this is true or applies and answer accordingly. If it does apply, I recommend clicking yes because you could be eligible for additional federal student aid funds. Now you're going to choose your high school completion status. You need at least a high school diploma or equivalent in order to be eligible for federal student aid. We're going to choose high school diploma for this particular scenario. You're going to go ahead and choose your state. What we're doing is we're going ahead and looking for your high school. This is a demonstration. This list is not accurate geographically with these different high schools on here. This is just for demonstration purposes only. When you're in your actual FAFSA application, you will be able to find your high school. If you're having trouble finding your high school, you can add it manually, but you just want to be careful if that situation is happening. If you had done an online school in something else, you want to make sure that your school offered you the appropriate credentials in order to apply for federal student aid. Once you choose your high school, you're going to confirm that it is correct, and you're going to hit continue. Now let's go over your finances. We're going to put in some of our tax return information. Now, this is asking you to break down very specific tax information that it may not have been able to gather from the transfer of your tax return from the IRS or your tax transcript from the IRS. You want to read each question carefully, and you're seeing that it's going to ask you what to refer to. This is a student inputting their 2024 tax return information. So you're going to go ahead, you have to enter at least a 0 in order to move forward. The question that discusses colleges, grants, scholarships, and AmeriCorps benefits. This is only grants, scholarships, and benefits that needed to be reported as income to the IRS. Do not just include any scholarship or grant you received here. Things like federal Pell Grants are not considered taxable income to the IRS. This could be other types of scholarships that you had to report, and it only is these types of scholarships that are considered taxable income. This does not apply to many students. It could apply to some, but just keeping it out there that is only grants and scholarships and other benefits that are reported as taxable income, not just received. And then foreign earned income exclusion is a very specific line in your 1040 Schedule 1 that you would take the information from. And if it's anything greater than 0, go ahead and input that into the application. The next set of questions is going to be about assets. You're going to input as of today, as of the completion of this FAFSA, what is your total in your cash savings and checking accounts that you have. This could be 0. If your total is 0 that day, keep it at 0. If you have any money in there, you are required to report it. Current net worth of investments, including real estate. Here's a definition of what net worth is. You will not be including the primary home where the student lives in if on the FAFSA application. Other types of applications may require this information, like the CSS profile, but the FAFSA is not going to ask that. Now when it comes to small businesses, family farms, and commercial fishing businesses and other related expenses, if the family business has 100 or fewer full-time employees, it does not need to be included in your FAFSA anymore. It was included a brief time for the 2024-2025 FAFSA and the 2025-2026 FAFSA due to the FAFSA Simplification Act. It changed and it removed that exemption from assets. Now, with the passing of H.R. 1, or the One Big Beautiful Bill, it has gone back to the rules before the FAFSA Simplification Act. You are not required to report any family business with 100 or fewer full-time employees. Now you're going to be making your school list. You're going to be going through, if you have a school list of schools you want to apply, go ahead and add that in here. If you are looking for schools in your area, you can use the Finder to help you find the schools, or you can just enter your federal school codes on here. There's a list online, or it might be on your school's website, and you can go ahead and just include the federal school code instead of searching for these schools. You'll see a list when you put in the criteria. Once again, this is a demo for demonstration purposes only. The online FAFSA application can list up to 20 schools at a time. Once you confirm your information has been sent to the schools, you can go back in and edit and remove some schools to add additional schools if you plan on applying to more than 20. You do not need to know where you're going. You don't need to have applied already. Any prospective school we recommend you listing here. If you are looking to get in-state tuition, you should double check on the information on studentaid.gov of the order of schools on your list to see if there's any states that require you to list any schools in a particular order, and do it that way if necessary. If not, your federal school code list, it doesn't matter the order in which you list your schools. Remember, this is demo only, so these schools aren't necessarily being showed with the correct addresses or federal school codes, just for demonstration purposes only. There will be a warning here or information here regarding your state of residence and your school order. It's just a nice double check, so you don't have to go to the studentaid.gov site and double check it there. But if there's any question, it will flag you here as well. You're going to review your school code list. You can see I only listed 3 of 20. I could have listed several more. Here, you can list as many or as little. You need at least one in this section here. Now it's time to invite your parent. Your parent is going to be your FAFSA contributor because you're a dependent undergraduate student. Anyone who's considered a guardian but they haven't legally adopted you is not going to be considered a FAFSA contributor. And if you have that situation and it's asking for parent information, make sure you answer those dependency questions correctly, because there's a good chance that you should be classified as an independent student. If you're not sure who is your FAFSA parent, you click on the link here. It will walk you through the steps to determine who your FAFSA parent is and who's going to be your contributor. If your parents are married and live together, both of your parents' information needs to be provided in the FAFSA. However, if your parents filed their taxes jointly, only one parent needs to be the FAFSA contributor to accept and provide consent to transfer that federal tax information into your FAFSA. The reason they both don't need it is because they filed their taxes jointly and only one tax return needs to be uploaded. If your parents were never married and you need to determine who your FAFSA parent is, you would go through the steps. The first step is looking to see which parent provided you with the most support for the past 12 months. If they provided you equal support, your FAFSA parent would be the parent who has the higher income and assets to complete the FAFSA. If your FAFSA parent, who's determined in that scenario, is married and has a spouse or your step parent, and they filed their taxes jointly, only your parent is the FAFSA contributor. If they file their taxes separately, both your parent and your step parent would need to be FAFSA contributors on your FAFSA. If you have a situation where your parent has passed away or your parents have passed away, but you do have a step parent, your step parent is actually not considered your FAFSA parent unless they have legally adopted you. And you want to go back to those dependency status questions to make sure you answered them correctly in order to be classified correctly for the FAFSA and what information you need to provide. So let's go into inviting a parent contributor. The FAFSA has changed quite a bit. If you did it in the past or did it when you're a student and this is a parent helping the student go through the application. In the past, online, everyone could complete the same application at the same time. Everyone could sit together, log in with just the student's FSA ID. Now, the person providing the information has to be the person who is being asked the information. So if you're a FAFSA contributor, you can't just complete the FAFSA under the student's FSA ID. You must log in with your own FSA ID and complete the applicable sections. So you're going to go ahead and input the email to your parent and send the invite. Your parent will receive the application invite and then they can go ahead and log in. As the student, you can see your progress so far. And then it's going to show you that this section is shared with one contributor. Here's the invite code you can share with your parent, and you can see this on your status anytime you're logged in as well. But that'll let you know that there has been an application already started. And you're going to hit continue. You're going to hit continue at this point because you are not done as the student. You need to sign and submit. If you do not sign and submit, the FAFSA application will not be processed. You have to sign, submit, and all your FAFSA contributors need to sign and submit. So go ahead, read through what you're agreeing to and confirming you have provided information that, to the best of your knowledge, is accurate and complete, and that you filed all the required taxes you were required to file, and that you're not lying. This is a federal form. There are criminal penalties of fines up to $20,000 or imprisonment if you are found to be lying or trying to mislead or give false information on your FAFSA application. It's very serious. Give accurate, correct answers on your FAFSA application as it is a federal form. Lying is not worth it when it comes to submitting federal forms. You need to check this box saying that you agree to the terms outlined above, and then sign the student section. You're going to see that you are pending submission, that you need to check with your contributor. Your parent, your spouse, whoever it is who's the other FAFSA contributor. In this demonstration, there's a parent contributor that we've asked to complete it here. You can manage invitations, you can send another email if the email didn't go through. If for some reason your parent isn't getting it, you can try another email address for them and go through there. This is not submitted yet. You see the student section completed here, but we do not see the parent section completed here. So this is not submitted and complete yet. We submitted that email and the invitation has been sent, and this is what the invitation looks like in an inbox, depending on what your email provider is or who your email provider is. You can go here and accept this invitation. You were invited to help determine your student's eligibility for financial aid. It also reminds you as a parent that while you're providing information on the FAFSA, you are not financially responsible for the cost of your student's education. That's just a reminder on there to help you through. So you can go ahead and accept that invitation. You're going to log in with your own username and password. This student's name was Raya, and the parent's name is Alcina. You notice they have their own FSA ID username and password. If you were to log in with the student's username and password, you will only be able to see the student section and not the section that the FAFSA contributor, or the parent in this case, needs to complete. So we're going to log in here. You're going to type in the invitation code that was provided in your application. Once you enter that, you're going to agree and accept that you're going to move forward. It's going to give you another brief overview of the fact that you're a parent contributing to the FAFSA form. It's going to let you know that the FAFSA will not be processed until you complete this, and it'll answer some frequently asked questions. A bit of a summarized intro to what the students saw. And then it's going to go right into the intro of the FAFSA application. We saw this before with the student's application. Who are FAFSA contributors? In this case, the parent is now seeing it from the perspective of being a FAFSA contributor. It's going to ask you to verify the parent's identity. Remember, it's identifying who it's speaking to. So the parent's identity on here, like the student, the top part is going to be the FSA ID information transferred over, and then you can input any permanent mailing address or make any updates as needed to the permanent mailing address. Now it's going to get into that consent and approval of transferring federal tax information. This is required of not only the student, but all FAFSA contributors in order for the student to be eligible for federal student aid. So a parent denying this, a FAFSA contributor denying this, will make the student ineligible to receive federal student aid. This approve with the login with your FSA ID will give the consent needed in order to have the information transferred or imported from the IRS. Once you receive success, the application is going to go relatively quickly again because it's pulled in a lot of that income information, and there's a few follow-up questions you have to go through, but it's going to be a little bit simpler and easier to work with. So for this particular scenario, we're going to do a married, not separated parent, the state of residence, and the date the parent became a legal resident. As you notice, parents and students are asked this question, contributors and parents. They don't have to have the same answer. Just make sure you answer honestly. The next part is we're going to do parent finances. This is going to be relatively similar to what we saw with the students section. And the parent can go ahead and answer the questions as appropriately. You might see more questions here than the student saw. So for a dependent student, they may not be asking for some of these federal programs or federal benefits that could have applied. Answer this question honestly. These are federal benefits that if you have received them or been eligible for them, it could impact your eligibility for need-based federal student aid, or may qualify you for a lower student aid index, or the student for a lower student aid index, which could qualify for need-based aid. Family size is going to be asked of the parent. If you noticed, it wasn't asked of the dependent student. Family size is going to be imported from the tax information. However, if you need to make any adjustments or have additional dependents in the household that weren't reported on your taxes that meet the definition provided here, you can go ahead and answer the questions or change the answers appropriately and add people in your family size. This is enter the number of children or other parents who live with the parent or will receive more than half the support between July 1, 2026 and June 30th, 2027. Right now, the parent indicated that they're married, so that is going to be 2, and then the student makes 3 for a family size. And remember, we're looking at 2024 taxes to complete the 2026-2027 FAFSA. So if a new child has been born or any other situation has happened, you can include additional dependents to be considered in the FAFSA. Let's add one. In this particular scenario, we now have a family size of 4. And this could happen, if you have an additional child that was born, adopted a child, or have taken on other types of dependents that meet the definition. Number of college. The student who you're completing the FAFSA for is automatically going to be included in that number. If you need to make any updates or changes from that, go ahead. We're going to keep it to that from this scenario. Now we're going to see some tax return information that is asking for additional clarifications on there. Read the questions carefully. This is from your 2024 tax return. So we're referring to 2024 tax returns. Any IRA rollover into another IRA or qualified plan, the answer for this can be 0. There needs to be an answer for this before you can move on. Pension rollovers, other types of things, go ahead and include that. Earned income credit, if you received it or not, it will be indicated on your Form 1040. Taxable scholarships. Like the student, you're only including any amount received by the parent or their spouse of taxable grants or scholarships or AmeriCorps benefits, things that are considered taxable income. Things like federal Pell Grants are not considered taxable income and do not need to be included here. And then foreign earned income exclusion, if that applies, go ahead and enter that, but you need to at least input a 0. Then go ahead and hit continue once you're done with that section. After you go ahead and indicate any of that additional tax information requested, now we're going to be going into additional income information. It's going to ask you to enter the total amount of child support the parent received for the last completed calendar year. This is not in regards to how much you're paying or how much the child is receiving. This is how much the parent has received in child support, if applicable. And go ahead, the answer can be 0 of this. The next question is going to say, what's the total cash, savings, and checking account as of today that the parent has as far as assets? Now you're going to be including your balance of today. Go ahead and put in whatever that is. You do not want to lie. This is a federal form, but you want to go ahead and include that there. Now, you're going to be also listing the net worth of investments, including real estate, but you will not be listing your primary residence where the parent lives. There's also a definition there of what the net worth is and how to calculate it. And just like the student where we saw the change that now allows you to don't include family businesses with 100 or fewer full-time employees, farms where the family resides, or a commercial fishing business and related expenses, it is no longer required to be reported on the FAFSA. Only the 2024-2025 and then the 2025-2026 FAFSA required it due to a change in the FAFSA Simplification Act. Before that, it wasn't reported. These particular types of family businesses and small businesses were not reported. However, the exemption has been brought back by HR 1, also known as the Big Beautiful Bill. So go ahead and include the current net worth of business and investment farms that do not meet the definition of the exemption. And hit continue. If there's another parent who needs to provide parental information, they can go ahead and be invited as a contributor. This demo was assuming that the parents have filed separately, so you do need to invite your spouse in this scenario to be a FAFSA contributor on your FAFSA. Go ahead and send the invite to the FAFSA contributor who is required to continue and complete the application. Then you're going to go through your FAFSA responses. You can expand them all, identify if there's any mistakes or any issues that you need to fix. You will only see the information you could visibly see while completing the FAFSA. You will not see any information that has been imported from the IRS. That doesn't mean you're not allowed to. You are only able to see the information that you own if you make an additional request for that. But in the FAFSA, that information will not be shown. You're going to hit complete once you review your application and ensure what you included was correct. However, you are not done yet with your section. You need to go ahead and read the terms in the summary of what is going to happen next. You're confirming what you provided is true and accurate and to the best of your knowledge. You're not lying or trying to be misleading. This is a federal form, and any false information, incorrect information, or misleading information can result in criminal penalties. Once again, it is not recommended to lie on a federal form. When you check the box, you agree to the terms outlined above, and then you are hitting sign. As you notice, the application is not quite complete yet. There is one more parent or spouse who needs to complete the application. As soon as that is sent and you've completed your FAFSA submission for your section, you signed it. Now your spouse, who's the other FAFSA contributor required to provide information for your student, should check their email to find an email to complete their section of the FAFSA. This parent is going to see very similar information as the parent from before. So we will be going through this rather quickly just because it's going to be what the other parent has already seen. Accepting the consent for federal tax information, any sort of questions, and knowing that if you don't approve that, the student will not be eligible for federal student aid because they're required to have you as a FAFSA contributor. Once that's successfully completed, it's going to go through your finances. It's going to ask some pretty similar questions as what the spouse saw or the other FAFSA parent. Go ahead and make any changes or updates as needed on that information. Now, because that FAFSA parent or spouse only needed to provide some high-level information, their application is going to be relatively quick, but they do need to sign and submit their application. So go ahead. This is saying the same type of thing. Everything is correct. You did not try to be misleading, and you understand there could be penalties if you did provide false information. Then you're going to sign. And then there's going to be finally a completion for the student, that the FAFSA form is complete. And this particular student, once they check the status of their application, it's going to say that the form is complete, and it's going to let them know the next steps. The student will be receiving their FAFSA summary, which would be including their student aid index. There will be some estimates of the type of aid they could be eligible for and other types of helpful information about what's going to happen next. We'll be going through this as a student who may be considered an independent student due to an unusual circumstance and may be considered an unaccompanied homeless youth. So we can go through the scenarios and see where you can indicate that and how the application will provide you additional information about your provisional independent student status and what steps you need to take after you complete the FAFSA. So now you'll get into questions about your student demographics. First question you will see will ask you the student's sex. This does not affect aid eligibility in any way, but it is used for research purposes. So we can go ahead and make that choice here. Another research purposes only question is to identify race and ethnicity. You do have the option to not answer if you are not comfortable answering the question. The next is going to be citizenship status, and this does need to be answered honestly. When it comes to completing the FAFSA, in order to be eligible for federal student aid, you need to be a U.S. citizen or national or an eligible non-citizen. If you are neither, you will not be eligible for federal student aid. But that doesn't mean that your school doesn't have programs to help you, and they may even ask you to complete the FAFSA to get your information in their system. But you will not be awarded any federal student aid if you do not meet the citizenship requirements or eligibility. For this scenario, we'll go ahead and choose the U.S. citizen or national. The next question is going to be your parents' education status. You can answer if you know. There is an option if you don't know. Then you'll be asked if your parents were killed in the line of duty, and you can go ahead and answer this if this applies. In this scenario, we're going to choose no. Now, back to the student. The student's high school completion status. It is required that you have a high school diploma or equivalent in order to be eligible for federal student aid. For this particular student, we're going to choose a high school diploma, and then it's going to ask you what high school did you graduate from. Go through on the list and pick the school where you graduated from. Go ahead and pick the state and city. Remember, this is the demonstration, so this isn't showing all the options that exist, but you can pick your state, your city, type in the school name, or you can hit search and pick the high school, pick your high school where you graduated from. You're going to confirm that it's correct and then go ahead and continue. Now we're going to talk about finances. If you have special financial circumstances, you can read more about that to get more information if you need help applying. But I always recommend to go ahead and start completing the application based on the information that you know. At any time, and read the questions carefully. It will let you know if it's looking for current day, anything in the past, or anything for previous years. So each question will be providing that much detail. If you do have questions or any other information, make sure to do some research or ask the questions before you answer. You want to make sure you're being as honest and accurate as possible. This is a federal form. For this particular student, we're going to select that none of these apply, but there are some options on here like free school lunch, SNAP benefits, Medicaid. These types of benefits offered through the federal government are federal assistance and could help and could result in a lower SAI, that student aid index. The lower your SAI, the more financial need you will have. Now we're going to look at family size. Since the information was imported from the IRS, it's going to default with that. If the total amount of individuals you claimed as a dependent on your tax return is different than the definition of who's considered part of your family size for the FAFSA application, you can go ahead and make those changes and updates here. Right now we're going to choose no, that the family size was correct on the tax transfer, so we're going to go ahead and go with that. When you complete the number in college, you're putting in the number of students who will be attending college between July 1st, 2026 and 2027. This question, the answer is never going to be less than 1. As you're filling out the FAFSA application, you're doing this on behalf of the student, and the student is part of the family and will be in school. If there's any other siblings that will also be in college, go ahead and increase that number here. But for now, we're keeping the number in college to 1 for this demonstration. Here's some information that was not transferred from the IRS and likely not even reported on your taxes. This set of information, you would be entering 0. This is not going to allow you to submit this without entering at least 0. If any of these accounts apply, make sure you provide the accurate information based on your own situation. Now, amount of college grants, scholarships, and AmeriCorps benefits reported as income to the IRS. As income is going to be the key here. If you're awarded college scholarships and grants and they are not reported as income to the IRS, you are not including that here. And you don't want to include that here as a mistake because that could be considered taxable income in the calculation. So unless you're reporting it as income, Do not include grants and scholarships here. If you are using grants and scholarships as income, yes, input the correct amount there based on the award. And then federal earned income exclusion. This is a very specific line on your 1040 Schedule 1, line 8D. And if that number is anything greater than 0, make sure to input that there. The next set of questions is going to be any amount of child support received. And this is the student receiving. Remember, we're doing this on behalf of an independent student. So this is any child support the student is receiving. Not received on their behalf, but for other dependents, if necessary. We're going to set that to 0. If a parent has been receiving child support on behalf of the student, they would report that on the parent section if applicable. For demo purposes, our student is not receiving child support for any children. The next question is going to ask you your total cash, savings, and checking accounts. This is going to ask you for the balance of the current day. Based on the date you are completing this, input the total from your cash, savings, and checking accounts. Make sure you do not include any student aid, retirement accounts, or any investments. The next question is going to ask for current net worth of investments. There's a brief definition of how net worth is determined. You are not going to include the home or the house that the student lives in. Some financial aid applications, like the CSS profile, may ask for the net worth of a primary home or a primary residence where the student and their family lives. FAFSA is not going to ask you for that. Prior to 2024, if you had a family business with 100 or fewer full-time employees, a farm where the family resides, or a commercial fishing business and other related expenses, you would not list that here as an asset. FAFSA simplification removed that for the 2024-2025 FAFSA and the 2025-2026 FAFSA. Now the One Big Beautiful Bill, or HR1, has now put that exemption back, and you do not list a farm where the family resides or a commercial fishing business and any related expenses as assets on the FAFSA. There was a lot of outcry and a lot of concern about the removal of that exemption. It is now back in there. So if you had to include this last year, make sure to read this carefully to see if you need to include it this year. Time to make your school list. Your school list is up to you, the student, of where you plan to apply. On the online version, the one we're completing now, you can add up to 20 schools at a time. You do not have to wait until you apply to these schools. If they're a prospective school, it's important that you go ahead and list them here now. If you're applying to more than 20 schools, you can, once you submit it and you confirm that the information has been received by your schools, you can come back into the FAFSA and edit it, delete some schools, and add the new ones in that you would like your information sent. So you have two ways of searching for the school. You can input the state, the city, and the school name if you know it. If you're not sure yet, you can use this as a search feature and pick schools that apply. Now remember, this is a demo. This is not the accurate school list, and these are not the accurate school codes for these schools. This is just a demonstration to show you how you would go ahead and do that. So you can go ahead and add the schools that you plan on applying to on this list. The state requirements to list schools in certain orders will also be present as you start completing this. As we indicated on this demonstration, that this is a resident of the state of New York. And it's listing here, the order of schools in your college list will not impact your eligibility for state aid programs. If there ever is a state that you pick that it will impact, it will alert you here, but you can also double check on studentaid.gov and then make any adjustments as needed. As you notice, you're listing schools here based on the way they were added to the application. All right, so we have completed the introduction, section 1, the personal circumstances, also known as dependency status, demographics, financials, and colleges. Then we're gonna hit continue. And believe it or not, we are now done with the FAFSA. Since this student was not required to provide parent information and is provisionally an independent student, they will need to have a conversation with the financial aid office of the school that they attend. And from there, they'll be able to finalize the FAFSA. Here at the very end, before you sign, you want to read the summary. You want to confirm and understand that it is a legal document. There are criminal penalties and consequences if you knowingly give false or misleading information in order to qualify for more aid. And those penalties could be a fine up to $20,000, imprisonment, or both. It is a very serious thing to be lying on a federal form, and it is not recommended to do that. Answer the questions honestly to the best of your ability. Once you agree, you do need to check the box before you sign and submit. Now it's in, congratulations, you have submitted your FAFSA. Once again, the school will be the entity contacting the student to let them know what their financial aid offer is. Once the student decides where they'll be attending college or they'll be returning to college, if there's any outstanding information or any outstanding items that need to be complete in order to complete the FAFSA process, the student should work with that school. If the student has applied to multiple schools and is not going to attend certain schools and going to deny their acceptance, they don't need to work with those financial aid offices to fix or make any updates to their FAFSA. They only need to be working with the school where they plan on attending. And that concludes our walkthrough of the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, for the 2026-2027 year. We hope that you find this to be helpful, and make sure to check out all our useful information on edvisors.com regarding the FAFSA, the updated 2026-2027 guide to filing the FAFSA, and other great resources to help you through and ensure that you get all the aid you're eligible for this upcoming year.